Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. This is my live stream, so welcome to those that are going to join in. Periodically, I will put up a link where, if you want to actually join in the discussion, you'll be able to hit that link and join into the discussion. I will also be following along with the comments as they come in as well as putting up some prompts, pretty much just to remind myself of what I'm looking to discuss here. And obviously, there's a lot going on about the OGL and Wizards of the Coast or Hasbro. I will sometimes use them interchangeably because I don't know exactly which whether it's Hasbro or Wizards of the Coast is really driving this, this change or proposed change in the OGL 1.0A, which I will from now on just refer to it as OGL 1.0, just to make it a little simpler. And we will go on. So we already have a comment. So let's see. Yes, the Rational Ginger, you are first. So welcome and glad to have you in here. So I'm going to talk about a few things here because I've been seeing this popping up here and there. And, one of the things I wanted to point out is that what has really made this this big firestorm, let's call it that. I was going to use a different word, but this firestorm was number one, self-inflicted. So whatever Wizards of the Coast or Hasbro has brought down upon themselves as far as the ire of the multiple communities, and I'll get to that as well. This was self-inflicted. This was something that they brought upon themselves, and they there was not much reason to do this at all unless they had a real agenda here, which I am going to, posit as a theory of mine of what their agenda is. Hey, Ducato, good to see you. And yes, for the purposes of this this live stream, I will be DM Bloodworth because I am talking about Dungeons and Dragons. And when I talk about Dungeons and Dragons, I am DM Bloodworth. When I'm talking about some other game system, let's say Castles and Crusades, then I will be Castle Keeper Bloodworth, and so on. So it's not that I am, shying away from using DM, which I've been using for the better part of 20 years. And even actually prior to that, when I was playing as a teenager in the 70s and 80s as well. So anyway, getting back to where I was at. Hello, Erin. Good to see you as well. So a lot of this is, actually, I'm going to say 90% of this is self-inflicted. Wizards of the Coast had no purpose in doing this unless, again, they had an agenda. And I've been thinking about this, and I've been looking over. I just looked through the 1.2 OGL, and there's still some major problems with that as well. And at this point, Hasbro Wizards of the Coast really has no benefit in trying to walk back and just say, all right, we're just going to go back to 1.0 and leave it at that. Just forget that any of this happened. There's no going back to that. You cannot unring the bell. It is too late for that at this point. So yes, and I will get to AI DMs as well, because that's a kind of a secondary agenda that Wizards of the Coast has had over the last 7 or 8 years or so. And I've touched upon that in some other videos before as well. But I do think it is part of their agenda, and I will get to that. So let me put up my banners. All right. So and I'm not going to bury this lead very, very far in. So I am going to lay it out there. And here is my theory, that Hasbro is using a scorched earth policy to coerce D&D 5e players, the 5e player base, to transition to D&D Beyond and the VTT or 6th edition, whatever the hell we want to call it, by cutting off their 5e content at all sources. That, I think, is the real end goal here, and that is why they will not get away from the deauthorization of the OGL 1.0. All right. It is so embedded in their scorched earth policy. What they recognize that when they create their VTT, that a certain segment of the 5e population is going to look at it and say, I'm not going there. I'm going to continue playing 5e the way I have been playing. And Wizards of the Coast is sitting there and saying, well, yeah, that's a problem. All right. And Cynthia Williams actually came straight out and said, the idea that you can buy a set of core books and play for a lifetime is just not a business model that she has any intention for the D&D IP to go on. So they have to kill that. And the only way that they can kill that is by causing a desert in the supply, in the source of 5e content. So you're going to see them do a few things. And again, this is my theory. The first thing that they're going to do is during 2023, and this has been sped up by all of the various movements of saying, we're not going to buy your stuff. All right. And you shouldn't buy their stuff either, because it is not going to get support beyond 2023. They're going to dry it up. If they did that, so now Wizards of the Coast is not going to produce anything new for 5e, but the 5e player base is still staying in there, right? They're going to be the adherents to their favorite edition. Wizards of the Coast is bright enough to sit there and say, all right, well, we've cut them off, but there is the OSR, there is independent publishers, there is all of these other sources. They're creating their own content as well. There are all of these other sources that are going to keep on supplying them with 5e content. They still will be able to play 5e without us for a lifetime. All right, we have to kill that. And the only way that they can kill that is by deauthorizing 1.0a. All right. And so that is what their real agenda is. And I'll put that in here too. This is why they must deauthorize the OGL 1.0a to prevent third-party publishers from providing 5e content to 5e remainers. All right, so they are the 5e remainers after Wotc abandons them. Wotc will abandon you if you're looking to continue to play 5e beyond 2023. All right, they're not, if they release a book during this year, just be assured that they're not going to continue supporting it thereafter. So let's say they put out a source book like they did with Dragonlance. There will be no other follow-up product based on Dragonlance from Wizards of the Coast ever again. All right, not unless they make it 6e and on their virtual tabletop. But if you have the 5e version of that, they're not doing a damn thing for it going forward. And they're going to make sure, if they haven't already, by hanging over this cloud over using OGL 1.0 to create anything for Wizards of the Coast 5e Dragonlance, there's no third-party publishers that are going to produce that, because there are even more pitfalls in touching on copyright materials and so forth that they're not going to want to touch it. So if you bought that setting, it's only what you homebrew yourself. You're not going to get any support from anywhere else in supporting that that setting. All right. So it really is a shame that they purposefully tanked their own product. They were hoping to sell as much as they could just on the legacy of Dragonlance and then quickly abandon it. So that follows through with my theory here, is that that's their true intention. I'll jump back on to some comments here. Yes, and I'm going to get to that, Cal. So yes, they if they want to kill their brand at this point, I say let them. Yeah, I mean, but they don't consider it. They're killing off the tabletop. They're killing off the tabletop brand. But again, like I said, they want to make sure that no third parties come in to provide the 5e player base any reason to remain with 5e, to remain with tabletop RPGs, to remain with the books and the and the paper and the pens and the and even the dice and so on. They want those players to move over to 6e and onto their virtual tabletop. You notice that they don't care about the OSR or they didn't anticipate that we were going to go to that anyway. So they're not worried about, whether they can entice us to go over to it. They know damn well that 99% of us probably won't, because we're comfortable playing what we're playing. And even if we might dabble with 5e, like myself, I mean, I can always get into this because I have the physical books. I have the core books. I can play that for a lifetime if I wanted to. All right. And that is what they hate, is the fact that you could have books that are 40 years old and still continue using them. They see you as an obstacle. And this is word for word, right from, comments coming out of Wizards of the Coast or out of D&D Beyond staff, is that the higher ups see us as an obstacle to their money. All right. They believe that we are, living off of their creativity and playing their games for free, ostensibly for decades, because we bought it back in the day and we're still playing it. So they are very, very perturbed by that and just the idea. So 5e devotees are getting something seen before in gaming. Well, yeah, I mean, this has happened, not seen before in gaming. Well, yeah, this is a new experience for them. It absolutely is. It's a new experience. It's more common in MMORPGs. All right, where they start you off and you're kind of, and then you all of a sudden you start to realize that there's only so far I can go without paying money. And that is the model that they really want to push. And I'll get into possibly the different layers of access you're going to have on their virtual tabletop. Let's see. We'll get to take a look at Bull Padilla's article on Wotc and check out the Scorched Earth mode header to see that they did when they lost Pokemon license under underhanded. Well, I didn't realize that they used a Scorched header either, so I was kind of thinking of it myself. But hey, if they used it already, coincidences. Brilliant mind thinks alike, I guess. Let's see. They had become our enemy. Yes, and I want to talk a little bit about that though, because there are some out there, very few, but still some out there that think that, oh, this is an assault against Hasbro and the success of Dungeons and Dragons 5e by, the jealous copiers of the OSR, utilizing the OGL 1.0 and independence, because we have to tear Wotc down in order to advance our own market share. And that perspective is purposefully failing to recognize that the greatest pushback on what Wizards of the Coast is doing, or Hasbro is doing, with this OGL fiasco has been the greatest pushback has come from 5e players. It has come from 5e commentators, from YouTube channels that were 99% or 100% focused solely on D&D 5th edition. All right. And every one of the supposedly 40,000 subscribers that unsubscribed on Friday, last Friday, or somewhere, in the interim there. Every one of those 40,000 subscribers that unsubscribed, they were paid subscribers, they unsubscribed. Every one of them was a 5e player. And the reason why I know that is because D&D Beyond only caters to 5e players. They do not support any other edition that even Wizards of the Coast created. They only support 5e. So every one of those people that dropped 5e or Dungeons D&D Beyond were 5e players. So this is not a push just from the OSR or just from independence. This is a push from all segments of the tabletop role-playing hobby. All right, including people that aren't even running publishing fantasy RPGs, because so many of them actually felt that they needed to include the OGL, because back in the day, TSR and then later on Wizards of the Coast in its early years was so litigious that it just made sense to just cover your ass and slap it in there, whether you needed to or not, whether you were using their SRD or not. So many put it in there even if they didn't need to do it. Let me get back to one of my banners and then I'll get back to comments just so I can remember where I left off. So, so this is why they have to deauthorize, and I hit on that once forced, and I'm going to get to one of Cal's comments there. Once forced into the D&D Beyond VTT, the player base will find that they have no ability to homebrew content for themselves at lower tiers, and that is verbatim right from a release, another leak from D&D Beyond, that the lower tiers will not be able to access homebrewing. In other words, at the lower tier, there is no DMing going on, and I'll further get onto that as well. This may be unlocked at perhaps the highest tier at $30 a month. Now, we don't know what the tier structure is. We've heard $30 a month is the top tier, and we have heard that there is no home brewing at the lower tiers, more than one, the lower tiers. So for it could be a paid tier that still doesn't allow you to homebrew content. And if you're not homebrewing content, that means also at the lower tiers, there will be an AI dungeon master. Players will only be able to play with content they purchased and again directed solely by an AI DM. People want to talk about the crown of the DM being stripped away. Well, it's Wizards of the Coast that's doing that. It's Wizards of the Coast that is stripping the dungeon master of not just their crown, their title, but it's stripping them from the role of actually running a game. Why is that important for Wizards of the Coast to do? Because on their virtual tabletop, if you can create your own content, you don't need to purchase their content. So they have to make sure that their virtual tabletop is so dependent on purchasing that no one is going to engage in it without being so compelled to pay at a tier that allows them to move forward and actually perform the duties of a dungeon master. So again, it goes along the lines, and they've been setting up this trend, in my opinion. They've been setting up this trend for a long time. Many of us who have been following D&D 5e and following the way that they have been handling their IP and the way that they've been producing books and talking about the role of the dungeon master, we have been seeing, rather than rulings over rules, we've been seeing rules over everything else. All right. They have to strip the dungeon master of the discretion of running at their own table and what they're going to do at their own table, and hopefully encourage players to become rules lawyers so that they can keep the DM in check. Because the DM that is not kept in check, the DM that makes rulings over rules, is also the DM that is creative enough to start producing their own content, and they won't need Wizards of the Coast to purchase materials. All right. Or if they do purchase materials, they're going to purchase materials and then retool them to meet their own needs. And in many cases, they're going to find higher quality materials coming out of third-party publishers. All right. Maybe less glitz, maybe less art, maybe less whatever, but the content is stronger. And that is what Wizards of the Coast understands, that they cannot produce. They can't compete against that. And so that's one of the other reasons why they need to destroy it. Now, let me go back to comments and get caught up here. Let's see. They want D&D to make more money and have everyone buying D&D, not just DMs, yet they offer nothing to players to buy. Exactly. And that's a comment that I made in my last video as well. And I actually did a comparison between the AD&D books, and 5e books, at least a good number of the 5e books. When they take a hardback and they put into it some additional magic items, some additional character classes or subclasses. All right. And then they they put in some setting material. All right. That is materials that they can use, both dungeon masters and players can have access to. But they also throw in an adventure into the same book. They did that with Strixhaven. They did that with the Dragonlance book. They did that with the Citadel, but the Radiant Citadel book. all of these books that keep on throwing adventures into them, and that makes it exclusively a Dungeon Master exclusive book. And then you have people like Cynthia Williams coming out and complaining, well, only Dungeon Masters buy books. Like only 20% of the player base is buying books, and the rest are getting a free ride. We have to stop that. Well, they're not looking at the fact that again, it's another self-inflicted wound. OTSR, what they used to do is they would release a setting book. They would release a supplement like like Unearthed Arcana, or Wilderness Survival Guide, or the Dungeoneer Survival Guide. Both DMs and players could use all of those things exclusively. Technically, the only real exclusive book that they put out that was just for DMs was a DM's guide. And I know some DMs don't like the players to have the monster manuals at the table either, but the DM's guide was the only book that was exclusively for DMs. And the DMs had, the reasoning to buy all 13 books, and the players had good reasoning to buy at least 12 of the 13 books. All right. So they just had a better business model of packaging what they were doing with the books themselves. They had a better structure. They had setting box sets as well that both DMs and players could certainly use. So Wizards of the Coast doesn't do that, or with too many of their more recent books, they've been throwing adventures in there, and then that prevents players from really purchasing them. Yes, that's true. Yes, pandering to diversity inclusion. I mean that's the big thing. It's like when you come out and you're saying like, "Oh, we're creating this book because we wanted to make sure that it's all people of color." Number one, I think it's degrading to those authors because it tells them that they were selected for their immutable traits rather than their ability. And then on top of that, in that particular case, 3 individuals never played Dungeons and Dragons before, and one of those authors, had never even heard of Dungeons and Dragons before. And then they didn't do any editorial review of those to see if they were actually decent adventures. Most of the adventures were they were fine with relaying whatever cultural story they were looking to tell, but they weren't Dungeons and Dragons adventures. And that was a problem. But let's get back on to talking here. So open D&D. So good evening. So OGL 1.2 violates the Americans with Disabilities Act, federal laws, and the U.S. Constitution, plus international laws. It's a global issue. Oh, I haven't seen. I'm trying to figure out where, because I haven't dug through it completely. Americans with Disability Act is the one that kind of catches me. So I'd be interested to seeing that. Their objections to the virtual tabletop thing is really interesting, and this is another thing that came up with 1.1 as well, but now 1.2 even more so, I think, is that they're trying to control what you're doing at your own table on your own virtual tabletop. So I play virtually only. And when I play virtually on there, I'm not publishing this stuff. I'm not releasing this stuff. I'm whatever, but they don't care about that. They're saying that if I put something on my virtual tabletop, and if I have the players, if I have the player casting a lightning bolt, and when they cast a lightning bolt, they've created a macro that will have a lightning bolt flash across the screen, of just solely for entertainment purposes and everything. They say that's a violation. All right. that's something that they want to stop. And the question, because they say you're crossing the line between a virtual tabletop and a video game, and that's what sparks my curiosity here. Why would they say that unless their intention is to turn their virtual tabletop into a video game? All right, and that's not what they're revealing right now. They're just trying to say, oh, we're making a your you know your virtual tabletop that you're accustomed to, just that ours is going to have a lot more bells and whistles, and it's going to be more integrated into our one-stop shopping, right? So your PDFs will produce assets that you can then transport into the virtual tabletop. That's what OneD&D actually means. Never meant the one unification of all editions of D&D. Only a fool believed that. So when you look at what they're trying to protect here, they're trying to make it that you can't, on your own virtual tabletop, in your own private setting, on in your game group on there, that you are not generating something that will simulate a very, very visual experience like a video game, like they are producing themselves. Yeah, I will check that out, Cal. So I mean, there are so many videos coming up, over these issues and everything. And I know 1.2 just dropped, earlier on today, but they said that they're going to do these fragmented drops. Because I was like, wow, it's only 6 pages long, so really a lot shorter than the 20. But this is only the taste, and very much like their, when they do these surveys, and I noticed this with the survey of the sixth edition surveys that they were doing, and Crawford came out and he was like, oh, 90% of the people agreed with this, and 80% was this, and the lowest was 60% approval. But we're going to, that was the critical, the critical, changing the critical roles. And he said like 60%. That's bullcrap. 60% agreed with that. All right. They're the sole collectors of this supposed data. They're the sole analyzers of the data. And then they're the sole reporters of what the data says. I do not believe that almost all of the changes that they proposed in those first two play tests were 90% or better approval of them. That's certainly not what I saw from a lot of people looking at it. And a lot of this 5e group of commentators were already pushing back against OneD&D long before this brouhaha came up over the OGL 1.0. Yes, they've, and I saw graphics that somebody else put down there. They did not release a setting book from 2007 until 2017. And even in 2017, the setting book wasn't their own. It was Matthew Mercer's. Really, to be honest with you, the best writing that they've had in the last couple of years has all been from Matthew Mercer. All right. Their own in-house stuff has been crap. And what they've stolen from the past and reimagined and renovated, they've totally screwed up. I mean, they screwed up Spelljammer. They screwed up Ravenloft. They screwed up Dragonlance. I mean, when you have the authors, the original authors that want nothing to do with the project, all right, they didn't even go to any of the secondary or tertiary authors of the Dragonland series, and none of them touched it. It tells you a lot. And the most praise came from the board game that came along with the whole packaging of it as well. Yes, and that's true that, the DMs will usually be the ones that that the players look to actually supply these things. But in my experience, again, DMs also probably produce more of their own stuff than they do buy. Um, and that's why it's better to have a series of books, not crazy like second edition or third edition did with all of those splat books, but certainly you need to make certain things that are very player specific, and do compilations of things and bring it all together and say this is the player's handbook too, and have those additional things. I mean, Castles and Crusades does it. They have a whole companions book that's just if you want to get into doing companions for player characters, like Rangers Pets and those kinds of things, then there's a book for that. And both the castle keeper and the player have a use to buying that book. Hi, Lino. How's it going? Mark, let's say, yep, missed the start of the stream, and you're telling of the history. Development of D&D as a game was community engagement, plain and simple, and got not played, no selling it. A game not played, no selling it. Right, and that's the thing too, is that a lot of this stuff, like the D&D Begone, all right, is I know there's one commentator out there that thinks that this is a huge attack against Dungeons and Dragons, that we want to see Dungeons and Dragons totally destroyed. No, we just want to see Wizards of the Coast either handle the IP in a much better way, or to eventually lose control of the IP. I'd rather see someone with a lot more respect of the legacy of Dungeons and Dragons, a lot more understanding of what Dungeons and Dragons has been as as the starting point and still a major pillar of the tabletop role playing hobby. But it's never been meant to be this monolithic, we are the only one kind of thing, and that does not match what that doesn't match what Arneson or Gygax believed in, and particularly in Gygax. Gygax did not believe that you should only play one game system. That's why part of the reason why TSR had so many different games in their catalog. Meanwhile, you have Wizards of the Coast with only one tabletop role playing game and one battle card uh, game that they focus on. And quite frankly, they're not doing a great job with either one of late. Let's see. Quick point, second edition even labeled some of their books player options, DM options. Yes. I mean they clearly made their books accessible to both parties, or both aspects of running and playing the game. Um, so there's there was just more opportunity for everyone to buy this stuff. It was just smarter. Now again, too many splat books in second edition, and from what I'm told, like 3.0 3.0 or 3.5 did very much a similar thing, that you can't have so much out there that it just becomes flooded and unnecessary. I mean, that's why they couldn't sell a lot of their inventory, and back then retailers could send it back. That's what bankrupted TSR, was the fact that they had too much stuff on hand and they couldn't move it anymore. Guess what they're talking about? They're talking about Wizards of the Coast having not just warehouses filled with unsold books, but freight warehouses filled with unsold books. That's like a comparison to compare it. Like a warehouse might have 1,000 copies of it. A freight warehouse might have 50,000 copies of something. It's just like, that's what comes off the train or off the boat, and goes directly into a freight warehouse. They're tremendously larger, and the one report or article that I saw was like, they have 3 of these freight warehouses filled with the last 3 books that they published, that they cannot get retailers to pick up, because retailers are sitting on 6 months worth of books that they can't move. They have the same 4 copies of everything on their shelf and they can't move them. All right. And I know this because Chris Cox, CEO of Hasbro, said this. It came out of his own mouth and he said it. Retailers aren't requesting any new product, and this was before the Christmas break. This was like back in like August, and he was like, our hope is that Christmas will sell off some of this stuff and then they'll ask to start ordering it. I don't think that ever happened. All right. That accounts for their loss of the third quarter loss, and I guarantee you they had a fourth quarter loss as well, and they're probably looking at a first quarter loss again. Yes, I really think that that's what it is. They're afraid that as the VTTs of Roll20 and Foundry and whatever other one is out, Fantasy Grounds, that they they could start to duplicate whatever Wizards of the Coast is looking to duplicate on theirs. And again, I think that they're creating a video game. This is historical. The video game VTT was what they were working on towards with 4th edition back in the day, and realized it was an unattainable then. Yes, well, that was, that was, I want to say, what was that, like 10, 12 years ago? 5th edition came out. Really, they started working on it in 2014. All right. So yeah, it was 4th edition, at least at the beginning of it, what had to be around 12. I didn't play it. I own it, but I never played it. So I want to say it probably came out around 2012, 2013. And and they quickly went right to work on 5th edition, because 4th was not what the player base was looking for. And for the very much the same reason, the 5e player base is not going to move to a video game. All right. And if that is what they're truly producing, then the 5e is going to want to stay where they're at and continue playing the game that they enjoy playing. And that is why Wizards of the Coast has to end the OGL 1.0, because even if they stop providing the player base with materials to continue playing, they want to make sure that third-party publishers aren't doing the same thing. Yeah, and I mean, I don't begrudge them from looking to monetize, their IP, their product. That's understood. but don't lie about it, and don't try to use this scorched earth policy of forcing people to adopt it. All right, and saying it's like, make a quality product and people will come to it. You know, if you're going to stop supporting 5e, then come straight out and say, hey, we're working towards a new edition of the game. We are going to slowly stop producing for this current edition, and this new edition is going to be even better. And we want you to take a look at it and look at the process as we're doing it. And you're going to find that 6e is a much better edition than 5e, and go with that. But they don't want to do that. They want to make sure that they scorch the earth policy to make sure that no one who's looking to remain with 5e, all right, will be able to do so. That they'll have no access to any third party, publishing that Wizards of the Coast benefited from for 20 years. That's the other thing, is that Wizards of the Coast benefited more from the OGL 1.0 than the third-party creators did. All right, Wizards of the Coast's D&D would not have become the brand and have the brand recognition that it currently has now if during its ebbs and flows, when it was at its bottom point, it would have never had the support to pick back up again without that third party support. See, and now they think that they can go forward without it because they want to create something new and then cut the bridges and scorch the earth so that the player base will have to come over to them. Okay, so let's see. Let's see. Question. Let's see. I'll answer. Question. Does anyone here know a devoted 5e player or DM that has turned their backs on Wotc D&D because of all of this latest nonsense? I know two who are looking to play something else. Well, I know that some of I counted no less than 6 YouTube channels with over 100,000 subs that were almost 90% or more dedicated to just 5e that have said, I'm done with Wizards of the Coast. It was from them that D&D Begone came from. All right, they were the first ones that coined it, and that's why I said that this is such an important disaster for Wizards of the Coast, because it didn't start with the OSR. It didn't start with independent games. It started from within their own house. All right, within their most ardent supporters that turned on this because they recognized what a shit move this was. And they probably recognize that not only is this going to just hurt their own, their own earning potential, but they can also see that it's leaving the 5e players high and dry with no content coming to them. And so that's why I call it a scorched earth policy, is because that's part of their plan, is to leave them nothing to turn to. And I don't think that they anticipated the response from the OSR and the independents to say, hey, wait a second, we're taking a good look at this, and we're starting to realize we really didn't need the OGL to begin with. All we have to do is maybe tweak a few things, some nomenclature here and there, and we're good to go. We never needed this. There are plenty of role-playing games out there, that don't have the OGL at all. All right, they don't need to. I mean, I'll hold up one right now. very, very popular, right? Index card RPG, no OGL, because it's his own game system. He doesn't use any of their SRD, and great system. There are plenty of others that do not use the OGL at all. There are others that only had the OGL because they felt like it's just added protection so that they can potentially be sued by anybody. I've even heard some creators, actually some publishers, say the only reason why we included the OGL was so that people could write for our game system. All right, again, not realizing that they could have created their own OGL to allow for that anyway. And so that's where many of them are turning to. They're actually turning to saying, we're not going to join, we're not going to join ORC, the open role-playing creative license. We're going to just create our own and just go forward with our own. I turned on 5 years ago, but also turned on 3 when I realized how much it had changed the atmosphere and burned out DMs, because 5e, having been in the TTRPG since 95, DMing since 96. Well, yeah, because the move in 5e has been to strip away the discretion of the dungeon master and refer it back to rules over rulings, and by design. I believe that Wizards of the Coast by design wanted to strip the DM from that from that discretionary decisions that they were making in the rules and setting aside rules, because if you have the one person that is running their table and running it counter to what Wizards of the Coast felt was the way that it should be run, you have to create a culture that is going to say, but that's not in a rule book. All right. And so you're running this wrong. And so that's what I think is part of this long game that they've been playing in order to lead to this, lead up to this moment. The only thing they did not anticipate was that they were going to spring 1.1 on the 13th, the day that it was supposed to take effect. All right. So what they were going to do is they were going to wait until Friday the 13th, release the OGL 1.1, and say effective immediately. And then let all of the third-party publishers and everybody else scramble and look for, well, what are we going to do now? All right. The fact that it came out about 3 or 4 days prior to that was not something that they expected, because someone violated the NDA in order to do that. Whomever that was, that person probably did more to save the tabletop hobby that anyone has done in the last 20 years. Because that one act has energized the entire hobby to look at the way Wizards of the Coast has been browbeating the rest of the hobby and not really appreciating both the legacy of the IP that they, have the privilege of owning, and also not recognizing how much the OSR and independent publishers have really propped up and helped expand the name recognition of Dungeons and Dragons by creating supplements for it as well. Let's see. All right, so let's see. Thank you, Mark, and a long time group wasn't. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people are. I mean, now, I'm not saying run to Pathfinder 2 either. I mean, I haven't taken a look at it. When I had Pathfinder 1, and when I first saw Pathfinder 1, I was like, it wasn't really my kind of game. And so, I did not, I didn't jump on it. Like I have it. I looked at it. It wasn't my kind of thing. I'm just going to stay with uh AD&D first edition is the Dungeons and Dragons of my choice. Um that's the one I still run. That's the one I will run for the rest of my gaming life. If I get another 30 years out of it, fine. I'll probably still have the same book that I'm running, and so my book will remarkably be like 70 years old by that point. Um, I think the book will outlast me. But let me just double check something here. I got a little alert. So, all right, I'll do that. So anyhow, let's move on. I've seen many online other YouTuber vids responses that are fed up, but I don't know any personally now. Yeah, many and huge YouTubers. I mean, D&D came out against it, with what she has 600 plus thousand subscribers. Um, Nerd Immersion, Dungeon Craft, some others have said that they're just going to spend less time or not cover OneD&D until something actually releases, like in 2024. But instead, they're going to focus their time on other things unless big news comes out. And maybe this is big news, but the point is that when people say any news is good news, any news helps sell. Not this kind of stuff. I mean, this is an absolute self kick in the nuts that that Wizards of the Coast has done to itself, and it's not recoverable. They cannot recover what they've lost here. Yeah, I know. I've been like looking at a lot of the things by Trollord Games. I mean, they had like a record 2 weeks or something like that. It was like they either had like, you know, I don't know if it was like 30,000 sales or 30,000 in sales, but just truckload after truckload of their stuff. And they were one of the first games companies that I know, or really the first one that I noticed that said, "Hey, we've been looking at our stuff and we just put the OGL in there just to, protect ourselves from getting sued, but we really don't have that much of their SRD. We have our own game system." And so they're just picking through it and looking through and changing, you know, changing magic missile to something else, and so on, just tweaking and changing nomenclature. And then they're going to release their own OGL. They updated and redrafted a little bit of their third party publishing guidelines. um, Not even structures, but they are going to include irrevocable and you own your own stuff. um, so they're putting the words in that's all that Wizard of the Coast needed to do. Excuse me. Okay, so yes, I ended up buying all of the 2E splat books just because I am crazy. Yeah, I'm a completionist too, and I got them right there behind me. You can see where's my thumb. That's my second edition collection right there, and many of the splat books. I controlled myself and do the same thing with third edition. Um, yeah, I didn't fall in that. I didn't fall in that rabbit hole with third edition. At that point, I just decided I'm just going to get the 3 core books of of everything. But I will not buy 60 core rule books. Um, and the 5th edition books that I do have, I'm either going to move them off into, because I'm about to get a whole bunch of Castles and Crusade stuff, and so those books are going to shift into my closet, or to my basement, or I'll probably donate them to my niece, who is into she's a graphic artist, animation studio artist, and she likes D&D. So I'll probably give her my third, fourth, and fifth edition to clear space for games I actually play. I have that one, Kabuki Kid. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's a lot of their, and Volo's guide was not even panned as being all that bad either. That they really fell off after that. I think, beginning with, the decline began with Tasha's. I think the game turned to crap after Tasha's. I don't know if I have the Necromancer's Handbook. Oh, don't get me thinking about it. So let's see. Yeah, a lot of talk about the older stuff. Let's see if we get to. Hey, Chris, how's it going? Yeah, waiting to hear your plans about continuing your work with like Anchor and how that's going to, what you're going to do with that, how you might have to respond to it. So definitely check that out. 2008. All right. So they went from 8 to 15, so about 7 years with that. Let's see. So Wotc, like that drunk that grabs the wheel from you saying, you don't know how to drive, but don't worry, I got this. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they literally did shoot themselves in the foot. Yes, this is a really important thing. The handling of this process by stealth has always been bad business. This is where trust dies. If any was present before it, they may have had, they had some trust, especially within the 5e community. This killed the trust in the 5e community. That's what is really surprising, I think, for everybody involved, is that, the way 5e player base turned on this is really what I think they got caught off guard by. And I think the 5e community might have also been like, whoa, these are other, like a lot of other people are seeing the same thing. And, it's why I wanted to focus and say, listen, for the 5e players out there, because you have a lot more to lose than I do. All right. I mean, I'm so entrenched in old school that, I had no intentions of really running 5e anyway. I've only played it, half a dozen times. So I don't really have an axe to grind on this as far as my gaming is concerned. But you do. And I mean, this is Wizards of the Coast looking to abandon you and then burn everything around you so that you can't even continue to play the game edition that you love. All right. And you are the most affected by this. You are the most victimized by Wizards of the Coast, moving in this fashion. Because, like I said, it's not the OSR that they're really hitting, because we'll continue playing what we've been playing. We'll there's no OGL in AD&D First Edition, and we could still play that all that we wish. And we've been doing it for so long that we can create our own content. But it's those new 5e players that might not be as comfortable with it, and 5e is so crammed with rules that's part of the reason why they do have a DM shortage in 5e as well. And I think that Wizards of the Coast is taking advantage of this, all right, in saying, well, not only do you have a shortage in DMs, but we're going to limit your access to content, whether it be our own content or third-party content. And then even if you do decide to come over to our 6e, virtual tabletop, we're still not going to let you DM anything. We're not going to let you homebrew anything unless you pay $30 a month. Talk about ripping the crown of the DM off their head. That they're just not replacing it with a wooden spiked crown. They're replacing it with nothing. They're replacing it with a sack over your head, and you can't see because you can't create anything under their policy. So yeah, it's a it really is an attack on the 5e player, because it's trying to coerce you into moving. It's like move or die from drought. Yes, that's absolutely true. Or at least the dominant name. It's not it didn't make them the dominant rule set, because I very few people actually consider their rule system to be the best rule system. It made them the McDonald's hamburger of the tabletop role-playing hobby. All right. Everybody has had it. They're the easiest to get your hands on. They're not the cheapest though, but still, everybody knows it. Everybody has had it. Everybody can get to it if they wish to. But if they have another choice of a hamburger, they're going with that other choice. So that's what the OGL has done for them. Is it's just made their, you see 5e all over the place. Even its competitors. I mean, even Paizo started making some of their adventure paths 5e compatible, just to tap into that audience. Yeah, Kabuki. All right, let's see. Yeah, I don't think that they're going to see anything new come out in 2023. I think that they're going to step back. I mean, if they're still complaining about a backlog of books, and the last 3 books is what I heard. So, they're sitting on, thousands and thousands of unsold copies of, Queen of the, was a Shadow of the Dragon Queen. I mean, that was supposed to be their big, their big seller, and it did crap, I guess. It's sitting there in warehouses, nobody looking to pick it up, no retailers requesting it. So, I think that they're going to step back and say, hey, you know what? We're not doing hardcover, releases. It's just so much cheaper just to do PDF and hope that, they, and make it available only on D&D Beyond, because they don't sell. You notice they don't do PDF of 5e materials on Drive-Thru RPG, because they don't want people buying a PDF, printing it out, and sharing it with their friends. I mean, that doesn't mean that, one person hasn't bought the book, stripped it down, and, made PDFs of it anyway. But the point is, they don't want to make it so easy of that. Plus, they can't control the content once it's gotten out there in physical form, which is another problem that they ran into with Spelljammer. they couldn't recall those books to change the Hattazy to something, um, less racist than what they wrote it. That's if, of course, you believe that it was racist, which I didn't, but still, they were the ones that called it. So, sort of a more gentleman's handshake, making third-party publishers reassure wizards won't come at them. Yeah, I mean, that's what it is. And I think ultimately, if it ever went into a courtroom, it's going to be a civil court. It's going to be tort, and tort has two principles to it. Um, tort law has a preponderance of an evidence, not of evidence, which just basically means just 51%. And it also has the reasonable person standard. And that's the real dangerous one for Wizards of the Coast, in my opinion. And it's a non-expert opinion, but I've taught it in school before, so I kind of know a little bit about it. But reasonable person standard basically says, the judge would sit there and say, but would a reasonable person interpret um, the wording of OGL 1.0a to mean that it is, that in perpetuity means irrevocable. And that's all that tort law requires, is that a reasonable person believes at the 51% level that is, that is a, reasonable person who would believe that it means irrevocable, and then they lose the case. So Hasbro does not want this to go to a courtroom, because if they lose there, it's done. Then you'll say, oh, we don't need the OGL at all. All right. And we could just make third-party content, and you'll be lucky if we slap a 5e on there. We don't even require to do it anymore. So they can lose the whole thing, just like what Johnson & Johnson lost Band-Aid, because so many people called the adhesive bandage a Band-Aid that it became part of the, common lexicon of the people. It became common use. Yes, old TSR was crazy litigious, especially under Lorraine Williams. Lorraine Williams was the first one to strip a dungeon master of the title of dungeon master. She stripped Gary Gygax from using the word dungeon master in his books on game mastery and on mastering role playing for players. I have the two books behind me. I'm just drawing a blank on their exact titles. Master of the Game was the first one, and the player one was the second. But he was not able to. He had to use the term game master because he threatened to be sued if he used dungeon master. So first instance of a dungeon master having the crown of the dungeon master removed from him was by Lorraine Williams. And now we have Cynthia Williams, no relation, but just a very odd coincidence that, she is the one that's going to look to strip dungeon masters of the role of dungeon mastering in the VTT. Yep, that's absolutely true, Sluggo. That might be so too. I mean, they've been always pushing this, very progressive. I would call it regressive, but just the, they do have, again, the morality clause that is in 1.2 that, tells them that there's, if there's something that is considered to be obscene, well, you got to be careful what you wish for, because Wizards of the Coast is not always going to be lording over 1.2, and someone else might end up owning Wizards of the Coast, and then at that point they will become the sole arbiter of what is considered to be obscene. This can very easily turn against one of their own um, constituencies. Let's say that um, people might look at it and say, well, that behavior, and it's not just behavior at the table. It's not just behavior. Well, I mean, they're talking about it being behavior at your actual own table, not just what you're publishing or playing on a VTT, even though that's technically at your own table as well. But they're looking at your other actions. They're looking at, well, you tweeted about something else unrelated to gaming that we find to be obscene, and so we can strip you of your license to publish, and you have no recourse. You don't even have a voice to challenge that ruling, and because challenging that ruling, they could actually consider that to be a legal challenge to their ruling, which is against their rules. But even if you are challenging their ruling and they allow you to challenge their ruling, they're the ones that arbitrate the challenge as well. So they could easily just say, nope, we're stripping you of your license because we don't like you, and go forward. I mean, many people that have looked at that already have said that's a non-starter. And it's not like they're admitting, oh, we want to produce materials with all of this offensive stuff in it and all of this you know hate or crime. I mean, they actually felt that they needed to say, well, if your product promotes any criminal activity, then we could be, well, duh, that's already been in the, that's already, a reality. You cannot push real actual crime in any product that you're producing. You don't need an OGL to tell you you can't do that. It's it's already out there that you can't produce something that is going to um, promote, and actually that it's not just promoting a crime, but if a crime is actually committed in its name, that's where it becomes a legal issue. Don't forget them safety tools, because we care about all the fields. Yeah, yeah, and I mean, they already push it at some conventions where you have to use safety tools, uh, and again, it's one that could control what is happening at your individual tables in your own homes. The OGGM was talking, he did a video earlier on today, was talking about the Hasbro police are coming at your door. I mean, they literally think that they can function that way, at least in trying to throw cold water on anybody and create that chilling effect to prevent you from doing something, to make you question, oh, should I publish this or not? Someone might look at this and they might find offense and then not put it out there. So you're basically self-censoring yourself, which is what Hasbro would certainly prefer over actually having to sue anybody over anything. Yeah, I didn't know that, and it certainly is possible. Okay, let's see. VPs. All right. Let's see. Let's see. I have a lot of commenters here. Just chat. Let's see. What do we have here? My group still plays BX. mixed with AD&D 1. Basically, our game is printed in 1981 and older. Yep. And that's the thing. I mean, we've had one person, at least one person with the YouTube channel that was like, "Oh, we're being told that we can't run, the game of our choice. We can't run 5e. We have to hide back in the shadows to run." That's not taking place anywhere. Right? That's not taking place. That's not what D&D Begone stood for. Uh, D&D Begone and back, I did a video yesterday where I stated like the first day that OneD&D was announced, I put a D in front of it inside parentheses. I called it Done D&D because what I could see was that this was the end of Dungeons and Dragons as a tabletop role-playing games as we knew it, at the time, so I saw it as, this is done. I mean, they're going to move forward with whatever they're planning. They're going to look to. I have enough experience with video games to know that that's the move that they were doing, and so far they've been proving me right in what they're talking about because I could see all of that coming down the pike that they were going to look to monetize. It's going to be subscription, it's going to be microtransactions, it's going to be more and more the one stood for unifying everything into one hub. I did a whole video on this yesterday. So this is just trying to point out the hysterical ones that believe that this is an attack on Dungeons and Dragons is absolutely not the case. This is a pushback on a company that is looking to destroy their own IP at the tabletop role-playing field and strip away the 5e player base from that. Some news outlets have already picked it up. I know that what is it, CNBC, which is kind of like the business channel of NBC. Not that NBC is all that great, because there's MSNBC, but CNBC is the commercial, more like the Wall Street aspect of it. I think Hasbro is going to take a hit in their stock, which it really can't afford to do. Ultimately, I think if this really keeps on pushing, and D&D Beyond keeps on losing paying subs, I know they're trying to say, oh well, the people logging into D&D Beyond to answer this survey is showing like a numbers spike in it because they don't differentiate between logging in and actually having a subscription. Two totally different things. And there's so they're trying to equate traffic to subscription base, and that's not true. It's not going to generate any money, and so their shareholders are still going to say, hey, wait a second, this company that we spent like $158 million on is not producing any kind of revenue. As a matter of fact, it's probably losing revenue because they just hired 350 programmers to get ready for the VTT. So I think if they continue, and if the boycott of the of D&D Beyond continues, and if the boycott of the movie really does take a hold, and the movie tanks, you could see the end of Cynthia Williams at Wizards of the Coast, because they'll need somebody to scapegoat, and she might be the first one out the door. Yeah, I would just get your, Ducato. I would get your players over to CNC. I'm currently working on something with CNC as well, and just waiting for those. I'm getting a bunch of books in from Troll Lords on Monday, I believe, and help me do some campaign fleshing out of some things. So I'm really looking forward to doing that. Yes, there's, and like I said, I mean, it really has been a wave of 5e people that have been pushing it out. All right, so they had 30K in sales. All right, so 30,000 in sales, not 30,000 books sold or orders, um, but 30,000 in sales. Yeah, that's huge because for them that was in the span of a couple of days. Cal, I only run on virtual tabletop, so so I don't have anybody in person to run with either. So if you ever want to jump in on one of my games, if you have my Discord, you can jump in and do that as well. I just remembered if anybody wanted to join in, I just thought of it now. We're like an hour and 26 minutes in though. I'm just going to keep this going and just deal with your comments uh, in a week. By the way, Cal, I'm going to start painting minis within the next week as well. I haven't painted a mini in 40 years, so it's going to be kind of scary. Yeah, and I mean, and then that's something I mentioned yesterday as well was that, you know, none of this stuff is going to impact you at your gaming table. You still have your books, you can still run your games. You could still run your games for the next 40 or more years if you're young enough. And your books will last. And even if they do fall apart, you just three-hole punch them and throw them in a binder, and you're still good to go for another 10 years after that. It's that is the thing that Cynthia Williams actually came out and attacked. She could not stand or couldn't grasp the concept that the tabletop hobby is one in which the goal has always been to create an evergreen game system so that you only had to buy the books once and you could play it for a lifetime. That's what it was all about. Was it's about creating a game system that is so good that you could just play it for year after year, and then all you have to do is buy additional content for it. But the rules themselves are good to go. And that is the aspect of the hobby that I don't believe she had any understanding of. Yeah, I mean, again, whatever is your game of choice is the one that you should be running and playing. Just diversify. Make sure that you're not just playing one thing all the time. PF2. All right. Yeah, I was going to say what's F2? PF2. Yeah, because that's where they've been trying to steer everybody to, and um, Swords and Wizardry and Rune Quest are some others out there. Um, yeah, I'm not jumping on the Pathfinder 2 bandwagon. I don't really need to. And from what I've heard, it's an even more rules heavy game than even 5e is. Oh, so Anchor isn't part of the OGL. That's cool. That's good to know. Okay. Looking forward to Osric. Yeah, so we have a whole bunch of games coming out here being mentioned. The Galorian setting is supposed to be very good, but yeah, it is a crunchy system. I've heard that from many. Um, Osric hardcover. I have the soft cover of Osric right behind me. You can see it there. That's on my OneD&D, my AD&D shelf, first edition, and a couple other things in there. I think I have my Beck Me Basic and a couple Dragon magazines over there as well, and the Rules Cyclopedia in the last slot. Yeah, it was before Volo's Guide. I mean, it was after Volo's Guide, I should say, that they really took a downturn. I heard that Fizban's Dragon book was a pretty good book too, and even though I only had Sword Coast Guide for a short time, I actually gave it to my niece. It was a good source book, but it was just that, it was a source book. See, prior to Tasha's Guide, with the exception of Fizban's, that was the only one after Tasha's that was, pretty much, you know, agreed upon that it was actually a very decent book. Um, I don't think that they're going to release their Giants Guide. First of all, they're attaching it to Big B's Giants Guide, which has no connection. Big B had no connection to Giants, and so to have Big B's Giants Guide just makes no sense. It just shows you that no one at Wizards of the Coast actually know the legacy of Dungeons and Dragons. They don't know what these characters were, and they don't know the lore of their own IP. So it's just another example of a book that everyone is going to look at and say, it's another trash book. All right, let's start looking at potentially wrapping this up. We're talking more about 5e, and I am going to, let's see, Hasbro wants to get rid of free thinking human DMs. That might be more creative than, yeah, no, they definitely do. They don't want, you see, with Sword Coast Legends. All right, so Sword Coast Legends um a game that Wizards worked with another company. I keep on forgetting if it was Cryptic. It might have been Cryptic Studios. I'm not quite sure. It was a pretty decent game, and you could actually function as a DM, and the players would go through it, controlling their characters. And then you, as your DM, you had like a little D20 that kind of glowed over the rooms that they were in, and you could drop additional monsters. You can create text. If they picked up a piece of paper on the ground, it would open up a text box, and then they could read technically read the paper and everything. There was a lot of, neat little things that you could do in DM mode, and you could create whole adventures, you could create campaigns, you could create, and actually never purchase anything from them in order to do it. And that's the problem. They don't want to have their VTT being as flexible that you can homebrew and create unless you're willing to pay them $30 a month in order to do so. So if you're paying them $30 a month, then they'll let you do all the creativity you want because they know from you they're getting the equivalent of a book sale every single month just to play the game that you could play on your own on a virtual screen, with your hardcover books and your VTT thrown up on the other part of your screen, and the players could manipulate everything and do their dice rolling on the VTT. You could do all of that already for free. You don't need to pay $30 a month to do it. And that's why they came out with a VTT policy that, oh, well, you can't do all of these bells and whistles because that's what we're going to offer, but at a $30 a month price. So they want to pull the 1.0a license away from the VTTs that are out there. All right. They want to stop 5e players from being able to access third-party publishers and getting 5e content. They want that whole thing to dry up and to force them to come over to Wizards of the Coast's controlled VTT. Otherwise, they can, or they could just leave. They don't care. They'll think that a greater number will come to them than completely leave altogether, because they don't believe that they'll have any place to go, because they've burnt all the surrounding area around them. All right, so let's see if we can find morality. I know I mentioned a little bit the morality clause, and the flaw in the morality clause is that they are the sole arbiter of what is obscene, and then you have no recourse to question their ruling. And it didn't even have to be involved with gameplay. It could be, something totally unrelated to even utilizing their product, utilizing your own product. It could be totally unrelated, and you have no recourse to appeal their final ruling. Yeah, it's a satanic panic with a twist. This is actually worse than the satanic panic. What Wizards of the Coast is trying to do here, they are the ones that are looking to quash people's ability to play the game, not the other way around. It's not segments of the gaming community that are trying to prevent other players from playing the game they want. This is Wizards of the Coast trying to prevent players from playing the games that they want. And even in participating in their own game 5e, which again, it's like I've never seen a company turn so much against its own product line just because they have a new edition of that product coming out. It really is amazing. Well, that's the other thing. I mean, Wizards of the Coast, if they're having such an issue with getting stuck with all of these hard copies of their books, why don't they move to a print on demand? Totally removes them from having to deal with shipping from China. It has it totally makes it where you get print on demand books mailed to you that much faster, because they always print them at a more local, like a regional printer, well, no matter where you're at. And so it's much easier to do with that. They don't have the shipping costs if they're looking to sell in Europe or whatever. I mean, it's just such a better model. And then they never get stuck with inventory, and the retailers can sit there and they can order books on print on demand to put on their shelf if they're actually going to be selling these things, or they could just get away from it altogether, and just stock their shelves with other things that don't require, the rule books and such like that, like that. Wizards of the Coast should turn to a print on demand if they keep on feeling that they're getting screwed by having stock they can't sell. But they have stock that they can't sell because of the quality is poor. The quality of the writing and, in most cases, the art is not well received either, and especially not in comparison to old TSR art. And it's just, it doesn't compare well with art, in some of the third party, or especially the independents as well. I mean, Modifius and Free League blow away the art of 5e. I wouldn't even just say consistently. I would say all the time. So it's like, it's without any doubt. All right, let's do one more. Take a look here, and then I will spend a little bit of time on where we go next. Yeah, I'm almost caught up to, oh my gosh, I'm not almost caught up. Let's go all the way to the bottom here. Yeah, going all digital. Yeah, so that's what I was just talking about. Mainly digital means that a lion's share of the money will go to them, cut out the distributors. Yes, they'll make more money that way if they go all digital. And plus, they've already seen the pitfalls of having hard copy with Spelljammer. You can't pull back what's already been sold. And so they can easily go in there if it's just a PDF and change the PDF. And since you don't actually own and you can't print the PDFs off of OneD&D, then off of D&D Beyond, then they have total control over that. You're essentially renting your items on there. Now, here's another thing I'm going to dispel. If you cancel your OneD&D, I keep on saying OneD&D, your D&D Beyond subscription, any purchases that you made prior to is still on your account. You do not lose access to what you already purchased. All you're doing is you're not going to get any free materials coming through later on. So I know that's something that has been said, that, oh, if you cancel you're technically burning your back library. No, you still have your stuff there that you paid for. You just won't have anything new coming in. Okay, so let me look at amazing. I just bought the Book of Vile Darkness, the 3 ebook. I was thinking of the movie. I think that's the movie you can't get. I just recently got the other two, the first two Dungeons and Dragons movies on one thing, but maybe it's the Book of Vile Darkness that is tied up in a lawsuit, and that's the movie you cannot find, or it's very difficult to find it. And it actually wasn't a terrible movie either, but the newest movie looks like it's going to be utter crap. Yeah, so let me go to my banners because that's something I did bring up here. So I think that the hashtag, D&D Be Gone, which is a play on D&D Beyond, I think that that's probably run its course. I've seen some people saying, well, I'm going to start going back on it. Unfortunately, that might be the case, that they start folding there, because nothing in 1.2 changes anything. In it keeps all of the bad aspects of 1.1. in 1.2, and then it goes even further and added some more aspects to the virtual tabletop portion of it as well. So, I don't see anything recently put out by Wizards of the Coast on the D&D Beyond site. Looking at just the 6 pages that they released today on their proposed 1.2 that we supposedly can do a survey and have input to, that's nonsense. Um, that even in that small brief point that they've so far released, I see 2 non-starters right in there alone. All right, and that's the morality clause, and then the VTT trying to control what you can do on an unconnected virtual tabletop that you're doing in your own private space of your game that you're running on there, that they have no control over the assets. They don't own any of the assets that you might have on there. And how are they going to tell you, well, if their players are shooting a magic missile, you can have an image of a missile shooting across the screen? It makes no sense how they would think that they can control that, and um, claim stewardship over that, like that, like they can pull your license from being able to do that. There's no license to use the VTT to begin with, that they have authority over a VTT that's not their own. It's just crazy. It really is. Um, so getting back to where we go from here, I have been saying right from the get-go, and I don't think that this movie looked like it was going to be good to begin with. Um, and I base that solely on the, not so much the trailer, but the interview of the cast. They didn't even really seem to be into it all that much anyway. And the fact that Wizards of the Coast or Hasbro has been trying to sell Entertainment One, which is the producer of the movie, before the movie releases, kind of tells you that they think it's a turd. And so they're looking to get rid of it. So I think that it's really important, and the movie is releasing on my birthday, March 31st. I would have loved to have gone and seen a D&D based movie on my birthday, and just not going to do it because I don't want that box office to be, a good box office. And for those of you, oh, you're hurting the people that produce the movie, and you're hurting the actors, and they all got paid already. All right. None of them are sitting there waiting for royalty checks from it. They all got paid up front. They all got paid already. None of them look like they were, really, Chris Pine wasn't coming back to make a second movie of that. And Hugh Grant was like, this is where my career ended up. He thinks that it's a turd. He knows it's a turd. It's a movie that, like Jeremy Irons, probably, despised the fact that he was even attached to the movie he was in. And so it's I don't think it was going to be good to begin with. It is certainly not going to be a blockbuster. And and it's a good thing, because I think that Hasbro needs to take a loss on this, so that it really puts them back into check, where they can start thinking to themselves, wait a second, you know what? Maybe we should focus a little bit more on the quality of our tabletop role-playing game, the originator of our brand IP, and and less so on these other things, because it's like, what are they basing their projected, this is going to be a blockbuster? They've never made a good D&D movie to begin with. So they have no history of doing it. They have no history of really producing a great video game. I mean, maybe Baldur's Gate 1 or 2, back at that time. But Neverwinter Nights was nothing to go crazy over. D&D Online hasn't seen an improvement since the day that it was launched, and it looks like it did when it was launched, what, in 2009 or something like that. It's like it just doesn't look like they've upgraded it all. In true Wizards of the Coast, practice, that's their MO. They release something, and then within a month or two, it's completely off their radar. They've totally forgotten it and abandoned it. And they move on to the next thing just to churn out something else, to then leave it behind and completely forget about it. That is their pattern. So, yeah, don't reward them. Don't reward them with don't reward their in bad faith actions as a corporation against their own gaming community. Particularly what they've done with the 5e community is just in such bad faith that hopefully hopefully it really does make some major changes in the direction of the company and how they handle the IP. And maybe at some point Hasbro decides we're going to let that IP go someplace else with someone else that is going to maintain a better stewardship of it. So I'm going to leave it off there. So again, I am certainly not going to see the movie when it is in the theaters. I am going to pass it up, and maybe someday down the road, when it is on a streaming service that I'm already paying for, or it's on TV, I'll watch it on TV quite a ways down the road. But I'm not going to give Wizards of the Coast a single penny until they have dramatic changes. Take one last look at comments and see. I think I'm all caught up. Hey, look, LGS has had it. I don't know who LGS is. But anyway, yeah, I'm going to wrap it up because my voice is starting to strain as well. Let's see. Oh, local game store. Okay. Yeah. I'm used to seeing that as FLGS. That's why I didn't pick up on that. So, but anyway, hey, everyone, thanks for joining, and you have a great weekend, and I look forward to seeing you on the gaming screen sometime soon. Sometime tomorrow morning, I will be putting up my 6th video on Skyrim. Yeah, if you want to play a video game, role-playing game, forget about doing a VTT and play some Skyrim. It really is an awesome game, and there's an AI DM there as well, I guess, and probably a much better quality game than what they're going to produce there. Daggerfall is awesome. That was the first one that I played. So Daggerfall is awesome. I haven't tried it on Steam yet. I think it's going to be too much of a shock to go all the way back to that. Morrowind, I love that. Never played the full main story of that. And yes, Daggerfall was massive, huge, big map, and the sound quality of the special effects, like the thunderclap. The first time I heard the thunderclap, I literally fell out of my seat. It made me jump that high and out of the seat. Get Daggerfall Unity. That uses the Unity engine. Yeah, I got it on Steam, so I'm not sure which one that uses. GOG has a version of it, but I heard it's not the best. Well, I have the version of it on Steam, so I'll double check it. But anyway, all right, everybody, we're almost at the 2-hour mark, so you all have a great one. Thanks for joining in. You can continue leaving your comments after the thing posts up. Probably takes a couple hours for it to fully post up. And again, have a great one. Stay strong out there. Keep on pushing the games that you want to play, and don't let anybody tell you that you can't play the games that you're looking to play, regardless of what it is. It could be 5e. Keep on playing your 5e. I'm pulling for you to be able to run the game system of your choice and to have all of the support that you deserve to be able to run the system of your choice. So you all have a great one. Take care.